Okay, welcome to a little video lesson on setting in Jekyll and Hyde. Okay, so as with theme and setting, here's a little definition. Setting is described as a place or type of surroundings where something is positioned or where an event takes place. Pretty straightforward. In this novella, the setting is Victorian London. Why does Stevenson decide to set this story here? What specific elements are present in Victorian London that allow Stevenson to successfully and effectively explore character, for example, or the theme of duality? There's lots of answers to that. It's quite gothic, the fog, the smog, the shadows, the nighttime, the deserted streets, and so on. Okay. Any answer on setting should also take into account areas within London, like Soho, described as a dismal quarter of London, and more specific aspects of setting like Jekyll's house, deserted streets, the cabinet room, darkness and fog, etc. Jekyll's house in particular is a good one because the front of the facade, the front is very respectable, whereas the back is described as dingy, windowless, reflecting perhaps the two parts of his character, the Jekyll and the Hyde of his character. So setting is absolutely crucial, it's fundamental in understanding Stevenson's intentions behind writing Jekyll and Hyde. Okay, areas to look at when considering the issue of setting, right? Characters, Jekyll and Hyde in particular, but Utterson also. And explore any links between character and setting, as I've just said. Theme. Are there any links with themes such as duality or the Gothic genre? I've already mentioned them already. Mystery and tension. Significance of the fog or the deserted streets and how their use creates fear or drama. Remember, we had Jack the Ripper shortly after this time, that the time the book was published. So the atmosphere was such in London that crime was rampant. There's lots of poverty, lots of interesting characters, dodgy characters, roaming the streets late at night, where the absence of policemen was felt even by respectable, wealthy gentlemen such as Utterson himself. Obviously, we'll look at quotations and we'll explore Stevenson's intentions. What advantages to be gained by Stevenson in setting the novella in London, for example, as I've just said. Okay. Oh, the last one there, impact on the reader. I'll go through them all again, do apologise, give you time to write some down. How does the reader react to the events as they unfold with a specific view on London? Okay, Victorian London. The novel is set in London but draws heavily on Stevenson's knowledge of his hometown Edinburgh to create a chilling setting, borrowing elements from the Gothic genre, which emphasises the themes of good and evil, mystery and secrecy. Setting also acts as an important symbol for characters such as Dr. Jekyll, who owns a fancy townhouse, respectable at the front but rather dingy out the back. Using London as a setting allowed Stevenson to explore the theme of duality and opposites. Duality is like the two aspects of mankind, of each person, each individual. Victorian London was a city of contrast between the rich and the very poor. We have Lanyon and Jekyll's houses in respectable areas contrasting with Hyde's located in some city in a nightmare. At the time, as a consequence of the Industrial Revolution, London was prone to thick smog. These swirling wreaths allowed Stevenson to create a tense, dark atmosphere where danger hung in the air around every turning. You can link this to duality and Stevenson's exploration of the good and evil that lurks within us all. Set in the late Victorian era, the Industrial Revolution was in full flight, resulting in a population explosion from 1 million in 1800 to almost 7 million in 1900, as well as a growing gap between the wealthy minority and the poor masses. Okay, nice bit of context for you there. Setting and characters. You can't talk about setting without linking it with characters. Stevenson uses setting to explore the character of Jekyll. By day, he is a respectable gentleman doing what they call good, whilst at night he's unleashed his alter ego, Hyde, who comes out roaring. London and its contrasting rich and poor areas allow both characters to fit in. Jekyll in his respectable quarters, and Hyde in Soho. The fog also allows Stevenson to explore the parts of our character that lurk in the shadows. His belief that we all have a little bit of evil inside us is symbolised through his use of fog, and indeed darkness. The setting works against Utterson at times, the fog cutting him off as he travels towards Hyde's residence. The fog is given a prowling, roaming quality, ominous almost, danger. You can't see. One thing you can't do in fog is you can't see clearly. So you can't see the characters clearly for who they are. Utterson cannot see one of his closest friends, Jekyll, for who he really is or what he really is. He thinks that Hyde is blackmailing him. It doesn't dawn on him, obviously, that Hyde and Jekyll are one and the same. The reader is unsettled by the way Stevenson uses the setting. Even Utterson at times yearns for the sight of a policeman to appease his fears, to ease his fears as he walks through some of London's deserted streets after dark. Longing for the sight of a policeman, he was at one point. In most cases, the events that occur outside are grim. The two attacks by Hyde, on the girl and on Sir Danvers' crew, both take place at night. Utterson's journey to Jekyll's house when he fears he's been murdered also takes place at night, with the use of pathetic fallacy as the trees were lashing themselves, the pale moon lying on her back, very gothic that, and personification, reinforces the sense of danger created by setting. So setting alongside pathetic fallacy, alongside personification, with the moon here and the fog previously, along with gothic imagery, all very terrifying and shocking for the reader now and then. The fog and darkness feed into the notion that Stevenson only reveals part of the truth at any one time. Utterson, and therefore the reader, are never in possession of the full story, until we hear it in Jekyll's own words in the final chapter. That's linked, so that the narrative directly linked, intrinsically linked with setting. Okay, a couple of quotations. Street after street, all as empty as a church. Okay, setting. Similarly here, emphasising how Stevenson uses setting to explore the battle between science and religion that existed in late Victorian England, implying people were turning away from religion. Remember, Darwin's theory of evolution had been published just 25, 30 years earlier, so there's which stated that we were descendants from ape. Okay, so not creationists, not the Garden of Eden, not Adam and Eve. So the real battle between science and religion, and the implication here is people were turning away from religion. Now we see this battle, this conflict between Dr. Jekyll and Lanyon himself. Remember, Lanyon refers to Jekyll as scientific balderdash, whereas Jekyll refers to Lanyon as a pedant 3 times, hidebound pedant. Okay, so they represent the two different philosophies or ideals or beliefs at the time. Enfield employing Gothic imagery to convey the threat of London, street after street, all as empty as a church. Deserted buildings is a Gothic element. Empty as a church. The cross, another Gothic element. Dingy windowless structure. This refers to the back of Jekyll's house, where he spends most of his time working in his cabinet. This contrasts with the respectable front end of his house, reflecting the dual nature of his character. Even Utterson is surprised when he discovers that the two parts of the house belong to Jekyll. He'd never seen the back part before. Again, didn't really know Jekyll, did he? A few more quotations, linking with mystery and tension. I was coming home from some place at the end of the world. Chapter 1, Enfield suggesting that London is a dangerous place, links to dangerous characters roaming the streets late at night. The question could be asked, what's Enfield doing out late at night on the streets? The question could also be asked, what's Sir Danvers Carew doing out late at night on the streets? But that's another story. Should make his name stink from one end of London to the other. This is Enfield revealing that reputation is important in Victorian London. This is his threat to Hyde, when Hyde had trampled calmly over the girl and expected to carry on and not suffer any consequence for that. So they forced him to pay a bit of compensation to the girl's family. And the threat they gave was, if you don't, we'll destroy your reputation. And reputation was crucial. It lies behind why Jekyll had to covertly, privately explore his inner self, his inner impulses, the part of his character that ultimately became Hyde, because reputation was everything. It's why Utterson doesn't even allow himself to go to the theatre, because he's worried about what people might think about him going to the theatre. Setting, the dismal quarter of Soho, like a district of some city in a nightmare. Very gothic imagery here, reflecting impoverished parts of London as akin to a nightmare, as like being in a nightmare. From chapter 4, a great chocolate-coloured pall lowered over heaven. Okay, this is referring to the fog, depicting the oppressive nature of the fog as it descends upon London. It's funereal imagery, foreshadowing death. A pall is the cloth that kind of drapes over a coffin as it lies in the church. Foreshadows death, and whose death in particular? Well, we have a couple of casualties in the novella. We've got obviously Sir Danvers Carew, but more pertinently, we've then got Dr. Lanyon, who dies of shock, and obviously Jekyll himself and Hyde, inevitably. Utterson thought he had never seen that part of London so deserted. I mean, portraying London as mysterious but also potentially dangerous. This is the point where he longed for the sight of a policeman. Okay, and finally, exam relevance. The idea of setting could be applied to any question on the characters of Jekyll, Hyde, Utterson, as well as the unsavoury characters described in Soho. The themes of duality, appearance and reality, good and evil, that is. The creation of tension and or mystery, obviously crucial. It adds a lot to the tension. And then the intentions of Stevenson. Well, why did he have the action take place in London, Victorian London? The fog, what did that afford him? Explore character, duality, can't see things clearly. Fed into the narrative. We only got a piece of the jigsaw at a time because we couldn't see the whole thing clearly. Well, Utterson couldn't see the whole thing clearly, and Utterson was holding our hands, the reader's hand, through the journey, the investigation, so we couldn't see things clearly either. Okay, I think that covers setting in Jekyll and Hyde. Hope that's been useful to you. See you again.